You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. I'm going to be uploading onto the old channel again, an older episode that we have done. This is episode 14, Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case Closed with Tom Carey. Now today is Thursday, August 6th, it looks like, and this video was originally uploaded on our Conflict Radio Network YouTube channel and all of our podcatchers on July 23rd, 2020. We are on episode... Let me look here. We're going to be doing episode 18 tomorrow. It was supposed to be done today, but Robert Stanley had something come up and he rescheduled with us for tomorrow. So episode 18 will be available on the Conflict Radio Network tomorrow. Again, this is a re-upload of an old show on our new channel that you guys are missing out on. Make sure you search YouTube for the Conflict Radio Network and come follow us over there. Episode 17, UFO Aliens in the Bradshaw Ranch. That was 2 days ago. Episode 16, Who is the Real William Shakespeare? Episode 15, Forbidden Archaeology with Michael Cremo. That's up. Episode 14, that's this one. Episode 12, The Hidden Universe with Anthony Peake. Episode 11, The Crystal Skulls. And Project Looking Glass. Conflict Radio Episode 10, Giants, Sons of the Gods. I believe that went up on this channel as well. Episode 9, Quantum Jumping and the Mandela Effect. Episode 8, The Power of Past Life Regression. Episode 7, Discovering Our Lost History. Conflict Radio Episode 6, Planet X and the Great Awakening. Conflict Radio Episode 5, Lucid Dreaming, Nightmares, and Premonition. Let's see here. I guess I have to click this button to see what the other videos are. Give me a second to go through. Episode 4, Waco, A Survivor's Story with David Thibodeau. Episode 3, It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us. And Episode 2 and Episode 1 are also available. Episode 1 and Episode 2 I'm really not that proud of. It took me a little while to get going, to kind of feel comfortable, I guess, talking. Episode 2, it's a good video, but the audio on the for the guest isn't very good. I don't know if that's my fault. I really haven't had a problem since then, but that doesn't mean it's not my fault. So anyway, this is an old episode. I'm trying to get you guys to listen to it. It's really a good episode, and come over to the Conflict Radio Network and subscribe to us over there. You guys are really missing out on some good shows. 50,000 plus subscribers over here. You guys need to come over to the new channel, Conflict Radio Network. Come over to the new channel, subscribe, and enjoy all of our videos. We do 2 a week. There's 2 shows a week going up right now until we start doing 3 shows a week, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get out of here and let you guys listen to the show. This is episode 14, Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case Closed with Tom Carey. Enjoy, and we'll be right back. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today's guest is Tom Carey. Tom has a BS degree in Business Administration from Temple University, a master's degree in Anthropology from California State University, and he also received a fellowship to pursue a PhD in Anthropology at the University of Toronto. Tom became interested in UFOs while in high school and rekindled that interest in 1986 when he became the MUFON State Section Director for southeastern Pennsylvania. Since 1991, Tom's research has focused solely on the Roswell Incident that occurred near the town of Roswell, New Mexico in July of 1947. Tom has appeared as a guest on a number of radio station and television shows, including Coast to Coast AM and Larry King Live, concerning the Roswell Incident, as well as appearing in several filmed documentaries. His latest books, Roswell, the Chronological Pictorial, and his new book released Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case Closed. Now, we're going to talk to him about Roswell, but I am going to ask him, I guess as we get towards the end of the interview, if he's heard anything about the Brazil crash. From what I hear, what happened in Brazil, I guess that we talked about this on the show before. There was an incident that perhaps started near Roswell, and there was a chase and an air fight, and resulted in a crash in Brazil in May. So we'll see if he's heard anything about that. Today is July 23rd, 2020, and we'll just get right to it and be right back with Tom Carey right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Tom Carey. His latest two books, Roswell, the Chronological Pictorial, I hope I said that right, and Roswell, Ultimate Cold Case Closed. Tom, you there?
I am here.
How are you doing today?
I am doing well, Michael. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Now, you want to tell us about your latest two books?
Yes. Don Schmidt and I have written actually 3 books in the last year and a half. The first one, which came out last year, that'd be 2019, was called UFO Secrets Inside Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That was Area 51 before there was an Area 51, where all the really foreign technology went. And that came out last year. And this year we had 2 more books come out. The first one was it was something new for us, something different, let's say, called Roswell, the Chronological Pictorial. It's a coffee table book, and it features the timeline, the complete timeline of the Roswell case from the day of the crash until the present, all the way up to the present. What has transpired regarding the Roswell crash? And there's over 400 over 400 photos supporting the timeline, and most of them never seen before. They're in color. When we have color photos, and others are in black and white. So it's 200, and I think it's like 258 pages, coffee table, over 400 photos, and you have the complete timeline, day by day, sometimes minute by minute, month by month, year by year, all the way up to the present. And it's doing very well, Michael. And the people who have commented back to us, they are just amazed. It's just great. Well, one fellow said it's the best book he ever read. And it should really be the companion for every Roswell book ever written, including our own. So that's came out earlier this year in March. And we have another book that came out in, we're in July, so it came out in May, called Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case Closed. And that title more or less gives it away, because we are basically stopping or stepping back from our proactive, and I emphasize that, proactive investigation, because everybody's dead. All the primary witnesses, first-hand witnesses, are gone. We don't know of one there is one still alive, but he's like 94 years old in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. That's the only one I know that's still alive, but everybody else, they're dead. There may be others out there that were first-hand witnesses, but that we don't know about because we never interviewed them. So to give you another, put this further into perspective, this week we tried to contact a living descendant, son or a daughter of a officer who was at Roswell that we never could locate, but he had a name that we recognized, and so we found his daughter. We found his daughter, and we just missed her. She died a few weeks ago at age 81. Now, this is the primary witness's daughter, age 81, and she just passed away. So that's what we're up against now. The offspring, the sons and daughters of the first-handers, are now passing away themselves.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it was 73 years ago this month that it happened. So if we had any, like, even if they were 1 year old at the time of the crash, that would make them 74 years old today.
exactly,
Now, there is
exactly.
a possibility that more evidence, I suppose, could come to light. I guess it's possible a lot of the ranchers and people could have parts of the craft still in their home or buried in their attic that maybe even their grandkids will stumble on one day.
Well, that's our hope, Michael, because normally we know from the ranchers out there that they had the air base south of town, south of Roswell, 7 miles south of Roswell, and they had crashes off and on of aircraft. And the thing was that the ranchers would always get to the crash site first. If it crashed out in the desert, the ranchers would get there first, and all their family members would go out there as well to see if they could help and see what happened and maybe help somebody. But they would always take souvenirs, pieces of the wreckage. That's what we were told by the ranchers themselves. And so the Roswell crash was no different. The ranchers got there first, and we know from talk, word of mouth, that the ranchers certainly pocketed pieces of the ship. And unfortunately, and we were even given names. Rancher so and so has a piece, or his grandson has a piece. But so far they haven't. We've contacted them and they say, "Oh no, we don't have a piece." So nobody's come forward yet.
It's not a single person has come forward with a piece at all.
Correct. So that's the one thing on the case that we are missing. We have interviewed approximately 600 or more witnesses, all of whom have a little piece of the story of the crash of an extraterrestrial craft. Nobody has said there was a balloon of these 600 or more. So,
Well, I heard that the debris field was about 2 football fields large.
at least.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a weather balloon causing that type of debris field.
Exactly. A weather balloon or any balloon, it goes up in the air, it expands and expands until it bursts, and then it just falls down to Earth. And it doesn't crash. It just flops on the ground and stays basically intact, punctured, of course, but it doesn't like shred all over the place like the debris field site for Roswell was described to us by several people who were there, that it was almost a mile long by a couple 100 feet wide, filled with pieces of wreckage that blanketed. It was a sheep pasture. The sheep pasture was blanketed with all this wreckage, a lot of pieces of wreckage. And our hope is, we know not only some ranchers had pieces, but the military, the GIs who went out there to clean up that stuff, we know that some of those had pocketed a piece as well. And we've heard over the years from some people, the closest we got to getting a piece was that a few of them said, "Oh, we had a piece in our house. It was on the television. We kept it on the television for years, but it disappeared over the years, and it always disappears." And another woman in Florida, a couple of years ago, she she contacted MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, that she believed she had a piece of she called it flying saucer wreckage from Roswell, because it was kept on, her father had it, and he would always ask her, "Do you know what this is?" And she says, "I don't know what that is." It's like it's a little piece of metal, just a piece of metal that you couldn't do anything with, it wouldn't bend. But she never paid attention to it. But he would, every now and then, do you know what this is? And when he finally passed away, she had heard about Roswell, and she knew that he had been at Roswell. And she put two and two together, and she said, "Oh my God, this is a piece of that ship that crashed." So we contacted her, and MUFON had already contacted her as well, but she wouldn't give it up. She says, "I'm going to write a book about this," and they always say, "I'm going to write a book about this," and of course she never did. But we found out later that she went to California and took it with her, and took the piece with her, and she had I don't know, a mystic, a mind reader, or somebody look at it. And then, I mean, you don't want a mind reader, what's a mind reader going to do,
Yeah.
You want to take it to an analyst, but she just won't give it up. And so.
Did she say what the mind reader said about it?
No. As soon as we heard that she took it to, I don't know if it was a soothsayer, a mind reader, a mystic, something. What is she doing? And so at that point we figured, oh, I don't know what's going on here, but we'll never get what we want from her, because she wouldn't give it up. And I didn't want to fly down to Florida to see it.
Now I was watching some documentaries on this last night, and in one of them it says that there were two ranchers that discovered the wreckage. That they never actually saw the crash. They just happened to stumble upon the wreckage, and then they threw some of it in their pickup, as much as they get in the pickup, and then they drove to Roswell to meet with the sheriff, I guess, or the police chief or whatever.
That's how the Roswell story started.
So did people actually witness the crash? Did they see the crash?
No, nobody saw the crash, because it happened about 11:30 at night during a severe thunder and lightning storm out in the desert, in the central high desert of New Mexico. It's their monsoon season. And so this would be the night of July the 2nd, 1947. We've pinned it down to the night of July 2nd, 1947. Big thunder and lightning storm going on late at night. And this woman, and we feature her in our chronological pictorial book, with picture of her, anything. She heard this, between the thunderclaps, she heard something circling over her house. She heard an engine, something, some strange noise of a vehicle in the air circling over her house, and then it went away, and then she heard a muffled explosion. She heard an explosion. Now, other ranchers also reported hearing a muffled explosion between the thunderclaps that night. So the next morning, a rancher by the name of Mac Brazel, who was foreman of the J.B. Foster Sheep Ranch, 65 miles northwest of Roswell, 75 miles northwest, something like that. So he's out checking his sheep and the pastures and the fence. And, after a big thunderstorm, you got to check things out. So he went out there with a rancher boy from the neighboring ranch by the name of D. Proctor. So it was the two of them. And they came across this field that we just described a few minutes ago, of this strange wreckage covering this Golondrina sheep pasture. Little pieces of strange metal. And so he also he noticed the sheep wouldn't go near this pasture anymore. Because they had to go through this pasture to go to the water tower tank or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So he wanted somebody to clean that up, because what's all this stuff on my ranch here? It's ruined. My sheep won't cross it. So he takes a couple pieces, puts them in 2 cardboard boxes. This is on July 2nd. I'm sorry, this is now July 3rd. So the next day is July 4th, and so it's the 4th of July celebration. He took a couple pieces to the celebration, passed them around, asking for people to give him an opinion. What is this stuff from? And they started saying, well, this could be one of those flying saucer things that crashed, because flying saucers were only 2 weeks old at that point.
Because they were spotted in Mount Rainier 9 days before, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's a new story, and so maybe it's one of those flying saucer things. So Mac puts a couple pieces in boxes, and on the 6th of July, this is now Sunday. I think the July 3rd was a Wednesday, and so they have the 4th of July. Then the 5th was a Saturday. And on Saturday, he notices some birds of prey off a mile or a couple miles away. They're circling. He's oh my God, what are they? Something's dead over there, about 2 miles away. So Dee Proctor's with him again, because Dee was staying with him for a week or so. And they ride over, and lo and behold, they find these 2 little beings about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, with large heads and slanted eyes, and they were both dead. And they really stunk. They really smelled. So now he's got the wreckage to contend with, and he's got these 2 little bodies that he doesn't know what they are on his ranch. So he makes the drive to Roswell the next day on Sunday the 6th. Visits the sheriff's office, Sheriff George Wilcox. Hey, Sheriff, do you know what this stuff is? It's covering my sheep pasture, and a couple dead bodies out there, and somebody's got to get out there and clean that stuff up. So Wilcox, he doesn't believe this story, because Brazel says maybe it's one of those flying saucer things. So Wilcox, the phone rings, and it's an announcer from radio station KGFL named Frank. Oh my goodness! Oh, that's terrible. I just forgot his last name. Frank Joyce, announcer for. That's what happens when you get old. Radio announcer for KGFL radio in Roswell, and Wilcox says, "Oh, here." He says, "Here, I got a guy here, Frank. He wants to talk to you. He's got an interesting story here." So he gives the phone to Brazel, and Brazel tells him the story, and Joyce doesn't believe him either. So Joyce says, to get out of it, he says, well, anything that comes from the sky, fell from the sky, is the purview of the Air Force. So why don't you call the base south of town? So Brazel gives the phone back to Wilcox, who calls the base, which was the initial involvement of the military, because he says, we got a guy here with this story, and the fellow who took the call was a Major Jesse Marcel. So he reports to the commanding officer, William Blanchard, and Blanchard tells him, because Blanchard's thinking, oh my God, maybe it's Russian. Maybe the Russians have something that crashed out there. So he says, go out, follow the rancher out to his ranch, and take another officer with you. So Marcel takes the counterintelligence officer, chief counterintelligence officer, Captain Sheridan Cabot, with them, and they go out to the ranch. And they get there late in the day, so they stay overnight, and they go out to the debris field site, which is the site we're talking about, the next day, which is the 7th, July 7th. They spend most of the day out there picking up all this stuff. They took a Jeep. Marcel went out in his personal car, a Buick Roadmaster, and Cabot took a Jeep Carryall. So Marcel packed up the trunk of his Buick, and Cabot packed up the Jeep Carryall, and they went back to Roswell. It's now the next day, July the 8th. Cabot got there first, and Brazel, I keep saying Brazel, I mean Marcel, stopped off at his home first to show his wife and his son what he had found. And even at that point, Michael, Marcel believed it was from a flying saucer, because we got that from his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., that his father, when he finally got home there, he believed that even at that point it was from a flying saucer. So that's how the story started, and that's how the military got involved.
Yeah. Now, see, I've heard some stories where people got out there and there were dead aliens, but there was one walking around the site. Did that happen?
Yes. That happened on July. Actually, that happened on July the 7th.
So that would have been 5 days later.
No, it happened on. See, Brazel comes into town on Sunday the 6th, and they go out to the Brazel Ranch that day, and they don't get to the debris field site until the next day, July the 7th. Now, while Marcel and Cabot are out at the debris field site, a call comes into the sheriff's station and to the firehouse. The calls always double tracked. When they called the sheriff's office, they always were piped into the fire station as well, because there were a lot of aircraft crashes and what have you. And likewise, if a call came into the fire station, it also was piped into the sheriff's office. Anyway, while Marcel and Cabot are out looking at the debris field site on the 7th, a group of archaeologists north of town stumble on a third site. You have the debris field site. The second site is where those two bodies were found dead, and the third site is where the ship itself we believe was struck by lightning, and it blew apart. And that's how those two little aliens fell to their death on that site 2 miles east of the debris field. Those two little bodies that Brazel found, we believe they were blown out when the ship exploded. But what happened was there was also a part of the ship, perhaps the inner cabin, perhaps an escape pod or something, that withstood the blast and continued on for another 30 miles before it came to ground. And that was just north of Roswell, about 30 miles north of Roswell. And that site had two dead aliens and one that was still alive. Now, here's where the story comes, is that this particular site was discovered by a group of archaeologists who were out there already looking for archaeological sites. They came across this downed piece of this inner cabin or whatever it was, and so they went to the nearest town, which was actually a gas station in the north of Roswell, and I forget the name of this little town, but it was really a gas station, and they called it into the sheriff's office and the fire station, and hey, we got a crash out here. We got a crash out here. Get somebody out here. There's dead people. There's dead little people. And so Marcel and Cabot don't know anything about this site. Brazel doesn't know about this site. Brazel's already going back to town, leaving the two officers out in the field, still picking up pieces of wreckage. Brazel's already back in Roswell. And so the call goes into the sheriff's office and the firehouse. And the Air Force I'm trying to think now how the Air Force found out about this site on the 7th, and this is before Cabot and Marcel came back to town with all that wreckage. They already knew about this crash site north of town, which convinced them that it wasn't Russian, but it was, as they called back then, interplanetary. It was interplanetary, the wreckage.
Yeah.
They already knew.
So the archaeologists had found the alien walking around with the other two bodies. I mean, they obviously called it in as a crash, but did they try to talk to the alien that was walking around? Like what did they do?
Well, what happened was the base, before the fire company could get out there, and before the military got out there, the base sent somebody to the firehouse. Don't go out there. Don't go out to the crash site. We will handle it. And they also contacted the Roswell city manager to also go to the firehouse and tell them, don't go out to the crash site. Well, one of the firemen, his name was Dan Dwyer, he said, nobody's telling me. I'm going to get out there. So he surreptitiously goes out there on his own with his crew chief. They went out in a tanker truck. This is like a pickup truck with a water tank in the back. They scoot out to the site before the military even got their shoes on, and they arrive at the site. And Dan Dwyer tells this story to his family, and that's who we got the story from. And he says, my eyes were drawn to the two bodies that were on the ground, obviously dead, or they're sticking out of the ship, something like that. When all of a sudden I could see movement out of the corner of my eye. I could see movement, and I looked, and there was a creature, not from this earth, walking around, alive. So you have two dead and one alive. And of course, his family, from whom we got the story, says, well, what did it look like? So he described what it looked like. You know, the standard 3.5 feet tall, big head, large slanted eyes, no nose except two little holes in the front of the face, a little slit for a mouth, long spindly arms and fingers, and long spindly legs, but it's only 3.5 feet tall. And they said, well, did you talk to it, Daddy? Did you talk to it? Yes. We talked to one another. This creature and I, we talked to one another, but we didn't talk to one another like you and I are talking, by moving our lips and our tongue and our voice, but we didn't talk like we talk. Well, how did you talk? We talked to one another in our heads. We talked to one another in our heads. And I guess we would call that mental telepathy, right?
Yeah.
Well, what did you talk about? Well, Dan Dwyer said, I was worried about it because, you know, we had a crash here and this thing is walking around, wobbling around. And the creature actually talked to Dan. He said, don't worry about me. My ship has crashed. My ship is destroyed. comrades are dead, and there's nothing anybody can do. I accept my fate. That was his message to Dan Dwyer. Basically, don't worry about him. He accepts what has happened to him, and that's when the military arrived.
And what date was that that he spoke to him?
That was the morning of July the 7th.
And the crash happened on the night of the 2nd.
Yes.
So that's 4 or 5 days that alien was just sitting around the crash site. Just, I guess it decided not to take a walk, or.
Well, of course, he didn't know where he was. I guess don't know, but he stayed with his ship. We don't know if his comrades died instantly or succumbed later on. We don't know.
Yeah. Did it have any injuries at all?
The two were dead, but the one that was walking around wound up at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We know that from a witness who was part of a air school, Air War College school the next year. This would be 1948. The next year, in 1948, he was at the Air War College in Montgomery, Alabama, and they spent a week up at Wright-Patterson, to get instruction on air base administration, stuff like that. This class was for officers who were going to be the next generation of Air Force officers to take the Air Force into the next century, and stuff like that. So they went up to Wright-Patterson to train on base administration. But this one day, they didn't have anything scheduled. So they were taken to a hangar there, the infamous hangar 18, but it was really hangar 23. And so there were about 60 of them. They're taken into this hangar. One guy said it was painted all blue inside. And so they're taken into a room, and they're standing around looking at one another. And in comes a guy wheeling a cart, and there's all this strange wreckage on this cart. And they said, "Okay, guys, take a look at this stuff and tell me what you think." Of course, it was the wreckage from Roswell, and they didn't know what it was. They said, "What is this stuff?" Nobody could figure it out. So they told them, they said it's from a crash of a flying saucer in New Mexico the year before. So they said, "Oh my goodness!" And they were some guys were spooked, other guys could care less, and other guys were really amazed at the properties of this wreckage. So they were taken into another room, and there was a big mirror. It was a two-way mirror, the famous two-way mirror, where you could see through to the other side, but whoever or whatever was on the other side, it was just a mirror. Couldn't see through. So they looked through the mirror, and here is this creature. It was a live one that was found at Roswell. Now, I don't know if it was standing or sitting or doing the Macarena. We don't know what it was doing.
Yeah.
And but that's what they saw, and they said, "Oh my God!" And our witness said he immediately had a mental connection with it. They didn't talk to one another, but he felt great sympathy for it, and he said he felt its humanity. He said they made a mental connection, and he felt great sympathy, and he saw the human qualities of it rather than the foreign qualities. And that's in 1948. So we heard later that it had perished in some experiment they were doing on it or with it, that it died a couple of years later in some experiment that they were doing. So that's what happened to it.
Oh, that's sad. It's a shame we didn't make a trade with it or something.
Right.
Or let him get back somehow.
Yes. tell us how to make that ship, you know. So, but that's we believe today that the five Roswell cadavers, let's call them, we believe there were five of them. We believe that they are being stored at Dugway, the Dugway proving grounds in Utah. That's where we believe it. They were at Wright-Patterson for a number of years, but Wright-Patterson started becoming, when the word got out about Hangar 18, they moved the stuff elsewhere, and we believe that the cadavers were at Area 51 in Nevada for a while, but when that got too hot, they wound up at Dugway in the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, north of Ogden, Utah.
Yeah, and what about the debris? Where do you think all that stuff's being kept now?
That is a good question. That is a good question. The debris for years was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the original Area 51. That's where all the foreign stuff went. And but when Area 51 in Nevada was built in the mid 50s, it didn't. The stuff was transferred there, but not immediately, because Area 51 in Nevada was built to develop our spy planes, the famous U-2, the U-2 Dragon Lady spy plane that was shot down over Russia in 1960, was developed at Area 51, and that's why Area 51 was built. And it also developed the SR-71 Blackbird, high-flying spy plane. Also the B-2 bomber and the F-117 fighter, they were developed there as well. But most people associate Area 51 in Nevada not with the development of our favorite aircraft, but with alien technology. That's where flying saucers were worked on, et cetera, and that's where all the foreign technology from off the planet went. That's what it's famous for. Now, the Roswell stuff and all UFO stuff, we believe from somebody who worked at Wright-Patterson. He said all that stuff went to Area 51 in the early 1980s, right? Went to Wright-Patterson I went to Area 51 in the 1980s. How long it was kept there, we don't know. But when Area 51 started becoming famous in the late 80s and thereafter, they started moving the stuff first to what they call Area 52, which is actually the base I talked about, the proving grounds in Utah, and then, that's where they moved it for a while. All the wreckage we believe now is in private hands, and by private hands I don't mean Aunt Sally and Uncle Harry. I mean the Rand Corporation, Lockheed Martin, the Bigelow Corporation, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, mega places that do have a lot of government contracts, but they're private companies, right? So they're not subject to FOIA requests for this and that regarding Roswell, regarding UFOs. They're not subject to FOIA requests because they're private companies. But that's where we believe all the physical wreckage is, not only for Roswell, but for all UFO physical wreckage.
Yeah, they say that there's been quite a few crashes. So what makes Roswell so important?
The thing about Roswell that makes it the granddaddy of all UFO cases is it's number one, the case has everything. We're not talking about lights in the sky that dart around, oh boy, look at that light in the sky at nighttime. I did some UFO. I was a MUFON state section director for a couple of years, and those are the only cases I got. There are people who saw lights in the sky at night, and that I can tell you that doesn't further our knowledge, and that doesn't further your interest if that's all I'm investigating. And so Roswell is not that. It's an alleged crash of a physical ship that crashed, came to Earth, crashed, spread wreckage, and allegedly had uh, biological beings on board, four of whom died and one who was still alive. And then there was a government cover-up and the threats of death and threats of imprisonment if you talk. It's a mystery that has everything that's left over to us from the 20th century. And the other reason it's the most famous case is that besides that capturing your imagination, which I think it does more than other cases, is that there are so many witnesses. A lot of UFO cases are single witness cases, right? Single witness cases, very problematical. Not to say that they're not true, but the more witnesses, the better. Well, here we have over 600 first and second-hand witnesses to this one event. And it's taken us 30 plus years to track down these 600. It's not that they're coming to us and saying, "Oh, please interview me, please interview me." That's not happening. It's that we have located them, we've dug them out, and we've located them and have interviewed them. Not everyone was happy to see us. A lot weren't. And they slammed the door, slammed the phone down. But we have accumulated over 600 first and second-hand witnesses that attest to the extraterrestrial nature of what crashed at Roswell on the evening of July the 2nd, 1947.
Yeah, it's definitely the most researched crash probably in the history of UFO crashes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now,
Well,
let me ask you a question about the autopsy videos that we see circulating on YouTube or whatever. Do you believe that those are real?
no, no. They're the famous alien autopsy. The the hoaxer admitted that it was a hoax. I guess it was 1995. That it was called the alien autopsy. We knew right away that that was a hoax for several reasons, and the problem is there are too many with all the technology we have, the computers and all the things that they do for motion pictures. It's too easy now to hoax something that makes it look real. So it's very difficult to really get corroboration, scientific agreement that something is real, because there's so many ways now you can fake it. So that's why we say our holy grail of Roswell is a piece of what we call memory metal. It's that metal that was scattered over Brazel's ranch that you pick it up. It's very thin. It looks like very thin aluminum foil, but it doesn't weigh anything. And you can crumple it up in your hand to it feels like you don't have anything in your hand. And you open up your hand and it just unfurls itself without a crease. Goes back to its original position. You can't cut it, you can't burn it, you can't twist it, you can't permanently deform it, scratch it in any way. And we still don't have anything like that. And that's what we're searching for. It's we call it our holy grail of Roswell that we're searching for. That somebody comes forward with a piece. But as far as these, I don't know what other videos or whatever you're talking about, other
Yeah,
than
the
yeah.
Roswell slides, I guess, as well, right?
Oh, the Roswell slides. We got hooked on that, and everybody's entitled to one mistake in 30 years. But here's what happened on that. Um, we get I received a email from this guy in Chicago that he had some very interesting slides pertaining to Roswell that I would be interested in looking at, but that I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to look at them. So I said, all right. So I signed a non-disclosure agreement because it sounded like it was really important. And what it was a color slide of a body on a display on a slab of something that looked exactly like what had been described to us about what the aliens looked like at Roswell. It looked exactly like what was described to us. Large head, I described it already. And there was one feature about it that really was the clincher for me, is that Dan Dwyer, the fireman who went out to the crash site on his own with his crew chief and saw the live one and he saw the two dead ones, when his family said, what did they look like? He simply said, he answered, the child of the earth. Now, that doesn't mean anything to me as somebody who's from Philadelphia, city slicker, but a child of the earth in New Mexico is another word for it is either the Jerusalem cricket or a potato bug. It's a land that's like large insect, a land, not as big as a tarantula or anything like that, but it's an insect, but its head reminds people of a newborn baby, because a newborn baby, the bones in its head have not fused together yet, and you have these dark lines on the head of a baby because the bones haven't ossified or fused together. So the head of this Jerusalem cricket or potato bug or child of the earth, as Dan Dwyer referred to it, had the top of its head looked like that. And in this slide, this slide of this being that was presented to me, this being had these markings on its head. I said, that's the clincher. Nobody would really know about that one feature about these lines on the head. And this cadaver on the slide had those marks on his head. So for me, that was the clincher. The other thing was, at the foot of this creature was a placard with writing on it. It looked like script or cursive writing on it. We spent 3 years trying to decipher that writing because it would have been key as to what was on that slab. We sent it around to many places that we thought, they do stuff like that, and nobody could decipher anything about the writing. So, and people were clamoring, why don't you release your findings now? What are you hiding? What are you hiding? So, after 3 years, and the other thing was the other slides in this collection that the person had sent me. His story was that his sister found them when they were cleaning out a garage. Somebody had died, and they were closing the estate, and they were cleaning out the garage, and she came across this box of slides, and she was like into photography, and all these slides that we were shown were obviously taken in the 1940s. In the 1940s, by the clothing that people were wearing and by the automobiles that you could see. These slides are all from the 1940s. And we had it was a Kodak Kodachrome slide. So we had it dated. We took it to the Kodak company, and to cut to the chase, they dated it as 1947. The slide was a 1947 slide. So you got the date, you got this thing looking like one of the Roswell aliens, and we got this slide, this placard that we can't decipher. We tried everything. Nobody could decipher it. So we said, okay, guys, we've gone as far as we can with this. We believe it's one of the Roswell bodies, taken shortly after it was recovered, because it looked like it was not that old. So we set up because we thought this was so important. We had Jaime Maussan set up Jaime Maussan is a Mexican UFO guy, probably he's worldwide. He's known worldwide, and he happened to be in the right place at the right time when we were doing all of this. So he set up a presentation that we were going to give at the National Auditorium of Mexico. It's in Mexico City. National Auditorium holds 10,000 people, because we thought this was an earth-shaking discovery. And so we set it up, then we go down there, and we have 8,000. We have 8,000 people there. 8,000. We had it beamed around the world. It was by I don't know what the thing is. You can beam it on your computer.
Yeah.
And so it was beamed around the world, and so on May the 5th, May the 5th, 2015, we had this big rollout, and we gave presentations and all that sort of stuff. It was a great rollout. And the very next day or the day after, lo and behold, somebody says they've translated this placard, and I'm in disbelief. How we spent 3 years? How can somebody that we don't know of say that they've deciphered this placard? And it turned out it was a mummified body of a 9-year-old boy. It was the mummified body of a 9-year-old boy. And
it just happened to have slides taken of it in 1947.
Yes. And it was taken by a couple. This is the other thing. The couple who took this had this slide collection. The husband was a field geologist in West Texas, and the area of the crash in New Mexico was within his area he was an oil geologist, right? And the area of the crash was within his purview, his area. His wife was an oil company lawyer. She's a lawyer. So we're not talking about Farmer Hiccup and his son Hayseed. We're talking about professional people who had these slides. So I'm beside myself. I said, this can't be true. We tried 3 years. We gave it to a half a dozen organizations to try to break this code. And here it is. Somebody says they broke it, and it was not cursive writing. It was just regular print. It was regular print. It said the mummified body of a 9-year-old boy, courtesy of so and so in San Francisco. And I said, this can't be true. Well, it was true. And what had happened was that the owner of the slide and his compadre, they were in a business where they use computers and graphics a lot. And they did something to the placard writing that made it impossible for us or anybody to crack. But it turns out there was more than one slide, and the other slide I never saw, and somehow that slide got out into the public, and somebody was able to decipher it with a program that they downloaded from the internet. So we got caught. But the thing was, Michael, given the information we had at the time, that's the only conclusion I could come to, because everything fell into place. The only thing we didn't have is we did not have the writing deciphered on that placard. And it was only by chance that somebody got a hold of it by mistake and was able to decipher it. And
well, it definitely made for interesting stories.
Huh?
It definitely made for interesting stories.
Yeah, it's not any hoax that we perpetrated, or unlike the alien autopsy, which they knew they were perpetrating a hoax. We believe we were giving the real 3 years of analysis led us to conclude that it was one of given the age of the slide, given what it looked like, etc., etc., etc. We gave our best judgment that we believed it was one of the Roswell bodies, and but it turned out that through a mistake, if somebody got a hold of another slide that we never saw, and was able to quickly decipher, clear up that placard that we were not able to.
Yeah. So moving on from that, I want to ask you about the diseases that have been reported that the locals had down there. That there's rumors of a chemical weapons conspiracy. Could you know about that?
That's new to me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, I just heard about. I was, I guess, researching Roswell last night and heard something about the local people down there were catching diseases, and
well,
there were rumors that it was some kind of they were doing some chemical testing on the people of that area. And
we often speculated. I don't know about what you're talking about, but over the years we speculated. It seemed to us that there were an inordinate number of people in Roswell dying of cancer. And we concluded that if that was true, it was because the Roswell base had nuclear weapons. That was the only nuclear weaponized outfit in the world at the time. And the base closed in 1967. So from, say, the end of World War II until 1967, the base had nuclear weapons. So perhaps that was the reason people had higher incidences of cancer than perhaps the normal number. So that's the only thing that we know. The other thing was that one of the witnesses who was at Roswell, this was one of the airmen, his name was Earl Fulford. He was an excellent witness. He was out at the crash site he was one of the airmen out at the crash site on his hands and knees picking up the wreckage. But he told me that along near base, near the outer base, the outer fence of the old base, there was a long trench where a lot of hazmat or hazardous material was buried from the 1946 Bikini Atoll Operation Crossroads, where they detonated 2 atomic bombs on this little island of Bikini in I guess it's the Marianas or something like that, in the Pacific. But they had a lot of hazardous material, and that was all buried in a trench on the outer fence of the Roswell base. And the townsfolk, I told the story, but they don't see it. I tried to alert them about that, but they don't seem to care about it. But that's what was told to me, that there's a trench there with a lot of hazardous material that was buried after the 1946 Operation Crossroads Bikini Atoll atom bomb tests in the Pacific. So maybe that's has something to do with it. But I've mentioned it several times when I was down there, but nobody seems bothered by it. And
Yeah. So out of all the 600 plus people witnesses you talk to, who do you think are the most important ones?
yeah, we can't say there's one most important because they all play a part. But early on, when we were, this is just before I joined the team of Kevin Randall and Don Schmidt. They had a list of names of, but this is when most of the participants were still alive, early 90s, like 1990. And they went down to Roswell thinking that they were going to debunk the case fairly quickly. They went down there with no preconceptions of whether it was a crash of an interplanetary craft or not. But they thought, oh well, we'll just we'll go down there and we'll get right to it and it won't be anything. Well, this one fellow they interviewed was the old provost marshal on the base in 1947. His name was Edwin Easley. He was a major then. He retired as a lieutenant colonel. They interviewed Easley in 1990, 1991. And so they're still fishing around to find out if this case was true or not. So Kevin Randall interviews Edwin Easley over the telephone, and every question that Kevin asked him, Easley responded, "I can't tell you. I'm sworn to secrecy." Every question, I'm sworn to secrecy. So I know myself. At some point, I would have given up because his answer to every question was, "I can't tell you. I'm sworn to secrecy." So Kevin, to his credit, he says, "Well, can you at least tell me if we're on the right track?" And so Easley says, "Well, what do you mean by that?" "Well, are we on the right track if we're going down the road that it was a crash of a UFO?" And Easley pauses for a second. He says, "Well, let me tell you this. You're not going down the wrong track." So there, right then, early on, you had a key witness who was in charge of all the MPs guarding the crash sites, et cetera, et cetera. We know later he was on the site, the crash site, telling Kevin Randall, "You're on the right track if you think it was a crash of a UFO." Later on his deathbed in Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas, the same hospital that Kennedy was taken after he was shot in 1963. But in 1991, Edwin Easley's on his deathbed there. So his family gathered around. His granddaughter comes in with a copy of Randall and Schmidt's book, UFO Crash at Roswell. So his granddaughter comes in and he says, "Granddad," and she holds up the book in front of him, and he goes, "Oh, the creatures." That's all he said was, "Oh, the creatures." So not only was there now wreckage, there were also creatures aboard. So he is one of the key witnesses, at least in my book, of the whole case, because he verified that it was an extraterrestrial ship that had crashed and that there were beings aboard. So,
So putting all this together, your book, The Ultimate Cold Case Closed, what are your final conclusions pretty much on all of your years of research?
well, my final conclusions, of course, we in this book, we treat it as almost like a legal case. Uh, that it was a crash of a UFO, a flying saucer, we believe is not only warranted by the preponderance of the evidence, which is what the legal standard is. It's in non-criminal cases. It's the preponderance of evidence, but it's also beyond a reasonable doubt. We believe that the evidence is so great that it's beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no other innocent explanation for all the witness testimony. So beyond a reasonable doubt, we believe that it was a crash of a UFO with 5 beings aboard, 4 of whom expired or were killed, and 1 that was still alive at the time of its recovery. That the government covered it up, it's still covered up, and we still hope that someone will come forth with a piece of physical evidence. And but there's no doubt, at least in my mind, beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, and I want to ask you about Building 84 and how they say that there are ghosts of the aliens that haunt that building. I guess that's the building at the airfield where the bodies were first taken.
Ghosts?
Yeah, that's. I guess this one guy is saying that ghosts of the aliens that died at Roswell haunt this building.
I'm sorry, that's a new one on me. We're not coming at this case from the ghost angle.
Yeah. I was just curious if you had heard about it.
I've never heard that. I've never heard that. I know that they have these shows on television where the ghost hunters, and then they go to all these buildings and they say, "Oh, did you feel that cold spot?" Or they have this little meter that says, "Oh, it's 1, 2, 3," and I'm thinking, what are they doing? So no, we have not looked at that angle. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just curious about it. So, I guess in wrapping this up, where do we go from here?
That's a good question, Michael. Our proactive, meaning that we're out there every day shaking the tree for new witnesses, our proactive involvement is we are now stepping back from that. If we get wind of something new, a new witness or a word of physical evidence, something new comes across our desk, we will of course investigate. But because all of the people who were there in Roswell in 1947 that we were aware of are all dead, except one who's in a nursing home in Roswell. He's 94 with Alzheimer's. That's the only one we know that's still alive. But everybody else is dead of a first-hand nature. And now their children are passing on. So it's time, at least for us, to step back, because the field has become barren. The field has become barren for new witness testimony. And but like I said, anything that comes along, we will certainly investigate. But that's why we have stepped back, because they're all dead, basically. And the government has never been a help to us. We don't expect them to help. They're still stuck on the Project Mogul thing for the wreckage, and the dime store crash dummies, they say, were the bodies that people were looking at. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So, but the thing is that, Michael, when we expect something like we'll get somebody will say, "Oh boy, you want to talk to this witness? Boy, they really got the goods on it," and they turn out to have nothing. On the other hand, you'll just tangentially find somebody and that you don't expect anything from, and they have something really interesting to say. So we never know what to expect. But the daily getting up in the morning and well, who am I going to call today? I'm going to call this person on this big list. It's we have stepped back from that.
All right. So
We have.
just
I might mention that you can buy any of our books at Barnes and Noble or Amazon online, Barnes and Noble online, iTunes. You can also go to our website, www.roswellinvestigator.com. That's www.roswellinvestigator.com, and purchase any of our books there as well.
yeah, and all the links will be in the description of this podcast. Just look down in the description, and all the links will be there. And you'll also be able to go to conflictradio.net and hit the guest tab, where you'll be able to find Tom Carey's page, and all of the links to his stuff will be there as well. I wanted to ask you one more question. Have you heard about this crash in Brazil that just happened?
No. Is
Okay.
this recent?
Yeah, this I guess it just happened in the beginning of June. There's a crash in Brazil that just happened, and from what I'm hearing is that there was a chase and a firefight. An aerial battle, I guess, that took place, but it started in Roswell, and it went all the way down to Brazil, where the UFO finally crashed.
Oh, is this online? Can I find it online?
Yeah, I guess so. I just search up Brazil UFO crash. I mean that's all I do. There's a bunch of videos online. I guess the Brazilian military was there, and they took over the scene right away. It almost sounds exactly like Roswell as far as the military taking over. But
I will check that out. I've not heard of that.
yeah, I was hearing that it was a chase. It started up around Roswell, New Mexico, and I thought that'd be pretty interesting if they were able to get out a distress call, say from Roswell. Then maybe they actually came to Roswell looking for any survivors or whatnot, and got into a chase with some
Wow,
U.S. aircraft and got shot down in Brazil eventually.
that is interesting. No, I have not heard of that. And once, when we end our interview here, I will certainly check that out. What a place to start, Roswell, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. All right, well, thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time talking to us.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Michael, and I hope you have a happy rest of the day. And I'm going to check out this Brazil thing.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of videos on it. I guess there were a ton of witnesses, and everybody's got their phones and stuff now. There's a whole bunch of videos and, of the crash site, that people got to, or, that actually some videos of the creatures walking around the site after it had crashed down there. A lot of them are probably fake. You know how that goes. But, I mean, it's still interesting to look at, and they'll let the mind wander. you know.
Wow, that's interesting.
All right. Well, this is Conflict Radio. We'll be right back right after this. Well, welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Tom Carey. It's pretty interesting to think about what happened at Roswell. Did a crash happen there? Were there alien bodies that were found, discovered? I find it hard to believe that there was an alien discovered wandering around the craft 3 days after the crash. I don't know if I would buy that. I mean, even if I was on a spacecraft and I crashed on an alien planet, I don't think I'd be wandering around my crash site for 3 days. But I guess you never know if the ones that had died maybe were alive for a little while. Maybe he hung around for that reason, just trying to take care of him, or maybe he was waiting for somebody else to come pick him up. Maybe they hit a homing beacon or something. I guess there's no telling. It was definitely interesting to hear about. I encourage everybody to go to roswellinvestigator.com and to check out his books. You can also find his bio and his page at conflictradio.net. Just hit the guest tab on the top of the page and it'll take you to all the guests that we've had. Scroll down until you come across Tom Carey's name, click on it, and it'll go to his page, and there you'll find all of the links to the shows that we do with him, as well as to his website, and give it a look-see. We are definitely living in interesting times. I don't know what happened in Brazil. It would certainly be cool if we can find somebody who maybe has a little bit of research done on it and talk to them and find out, what they think happened. So I will hunt down somebody eventually that can tell us what's going on in Brazil. There's definitely something that happened there. Was it a UFO that crashed? Was there a firefight in the air and there was a battle that went from Roswell or somewhere in the U.S. all the way down to Brazil and then crashed? I guess the crash site is in Mage Forest, if you want to Google it. Mage Forest, Brazil UFO crash. You can Google it. There's tons of videos and tons of articles on it. But apparently a lot of the videos that were initially put up on the internet have been scrubbed. They were all taken down. So, I guess we'll call it a day. I hope everybody has a good weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday with Michael Cremo. Until then, everybody, be safe.